Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deputy City Manager Jeff Chamberlain, and I will serve as the moderator for today's press briefing. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us as we detail the findings of a preliminary report on the unrest stemming from the Proud Boys March on August 15th. Today we have David Anderson, Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo, Jim Ritzma, City Manager for the City of Kalamazoo, Chief Carrie Ann Thomas with the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, and Assistant Chief Vernon Coakley, also with the Department of Public Safety. So after the remarks of our speakers, we're going to open the floor for questions from the media, and then we will also conclude around 2:30. So as a reminder for our media visitors, if you could turn your video and your audio off and mute yourself, and then also it'd be helpful if you could identify yourself in your username. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kalamazoo Mayor David Anderson.
Thank you so much. The new voice of the City of Kalamazoo since Zoom meetings started, our Deputy City Manager, Jeff Chamberlain. I appreciate that. And I also want to say thank you to those in the press who were able to attend this today. And as I saw folks joining, there are also members of the future press that are joining us today here too. I saw some very young people who were participating in this in the laps of their parents. So I'm glad we can all do this together. So my name is David Anderson. It's an honor for me to serve as Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo. And like most of you, I was truly saddened and disturbed that the Proud Boys had targeted Kalamazoo for a march on August 15th. Let me be clear. Hate has no place in Kalamazoo or Southwest Michigan. As mayor, I strongly denounce the Proud Boys and other hate groups that promote racism and seek to instigate violence and mayhem through their words and actions. In the City of Kalamazoo, we embrace the diversity of our community, and we strive to create a welcoming, inclusive, and safe environment for all our residents. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are critically important, and Kalamazoo's ethnic and cultural diversity makes our community stronger. The City of Kalamazoo is conducting a full, independent investigation into how our Department of Public Safety and our community as a whole prepared for and responded to the Proud Boys March, the counter-protests, and ensuing violence on August 15th. Our goal is to identify where we succeeded and where we can improve to ensure we are doing the best to protect all Kalamazoo residents, visitors, and public safety officers. Today, you will hear about how we're working together to learn from this incident and create a better Kalamazoo. We are committed to providing clear, accurate, and regular communications so we can keep the public, our community partners, and the media updated and informed. This is the first of many updates you will hear about our plans and actions to learn and grow from these events to create a stronger and more united Kalamazoo. Now I'd like to turn it over to our great city manager, Jim Ritzma. Jim. Jim, you're muted.
City Manager, you're still muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks, Mayor Anderson. My name is Jim Ritzma. As City Manager, I am committed to ensuring Kalamazoo is a welcoming community that celebrates the diversity of our residents. Everything hate groups like the Proud Boys represent is contrary to our values, beliefs, and culture. Let me make it clear. Hate groups are not welcome here. And we make a distinction between peaceful demonstrations protected by the First Amendment even if the views being expressed are ones we find despicable. And lawlessness, violence, and mayhem, which we cannot and will not tolerate. The City of Kalamazoo is committed to an open, transparent, and full review of these events with an eye towards continuous improvement. On August 17, we created a special City Commission subcommittee to help us learn from these events and develop a roadmap to creating a better Kalamazoo for residents, families, and visitors. The subcommittee included myself, Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin, Kalamazoo City Commissioners Eric Cunningham and Chris Pradle, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director Dorla Bonner, Deputy City Managers Jeff Chamberlain and Laura Lamb, and Department of Public Safety Assistant Chiefs David Boyson and Vernon Coakley, and our City Attorney Clyde Robinson. The preliminary report was sent to the City Commissioners on Friday and is available on our website. This report is an example or is an important first step that will help us proactively plan our response to future protests, demonstrations, and rallies. The report identifies important opportunities for us to implement protocols and practices regarding safety, community relationships, communications, equity, and accountability. The subcommittee has also identified the need to work with our community partners and other key stakeholders to develop clear strategies, practices, and regulations for First Amendment assemblies. We're also setting clear expectations for defining and measuring success to ensure transparency and accountability. While I'm going to let Chief Thomas and Assistant Chief Coakley further detail the report, I encourage people to read it. I would like to highlight a few specific findings and recommendations. The first is under safety. Our number one priority has to be ensuring our community is safe during events and that we keep them safe before, during, and after large public events. We also have to proactively prevent escalation and violent confrontations whenever possible. Again, we have to be proactive. That means working in advance with the organizers of these events, counter-protesters and other groups when possible to try to reduce the risk of violent confrontations. And I fully support implementing a credentialing system for media and legal observers to ensure that they are clearly identifiable to the police so they can do the important work they need to do in covering or observing these public events safely. I also support reaching out to national experts to provide training for members of the media and our public safety officers on best practices to support the important work that the press and observers do while at the same time promoting safety. Second is better communications with event organizers, the public, the media, observers, medics, and that means communications before, during, and after an event. The third area is fairness. We have to make sure all people are treated with respect and dignity, and that our rules, policies, and enforcement are applied to everyone fairly. And let me be specific about this. If any individual commits a crime in the city of Kalamazoo, they should be held accountable, whether they're from Kalamazoo, California, Kathmandu, or any other place in this world. Moreover, we have asked our city attorney to review our permit process to make sure it is fair, and we've asked him to make recommendations on potential changes to our permit process, or for that matter, any other city ordinances to help legally deter and discourage groups like the Proud Boys from selecting a city like Kalamazoo for their next march. Fourth, we need to have a community conversation about how we should approach First Amendment assemblies in Kalamazoo when they do happen. I applaud the Department of Public Safety for working with counter-protests and a local pastor to try to prevent the kind of chaos, violence, and mayhem we have seen in other cities. Yet we can all agree that what ultimately transpired in our city is not something we want to see ever again. Yet we need a community conversation if we are going to adopt a different approach for future events so everyone is on the same page, from our officers to outside groups to the event organizers and the counter-protesters. These are difficult decisions, and no course of action is without risk. Fifth, accountability is a key theme in the subcommittee report. That means we have to take a long, hard look at what we do and be open to recalibrating, improving, and changing our approach when circumstances on the ground dictate. When we have success, let's build on it. When we can improve, let's take the opportunity so we emerge stronger as a city. We welcome feedback and input from all members of our community as we move our preliminary plan into action. As a next step, we will be reaching out to key stakeholders for input, including community organizers and partners and other organizations, neighborhood associations, the faith community, and the city commission. We are committed to transparency and accountability because it leads to continuous improvement. In the coming weeks, we will share updates about our plans for implementing the subcommittee's recommendations to ensure we provide a more welcoming and inclusive environment for all Kalamazoo residents and visitors. I will now turn it over to Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety Chief Carrie Ann Thomas and Assistant Chief Vernon Coakley, who will further detail the report's recommendations and detail the review of events of August 15th.
Thank you, City Manager. I'm Chief Carrie Ann Thomas of the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, and I'm honored to serve the citizens of Kalamazoo. First and foremost, at the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, we denounce all hate groups. We strongly urge groups that promote racism and seek to instigate violence and mayhem through their words and actions to keep their hatred and intolerance far away from Kalamazoo. At KDPS, our top priority is always keeping our residents, visitors, and businesses safe by encouraging nonviolent and peaceful demonstrations. KDPS made a strategic decision to try to reduce tensions and de-escalate through avoiding a heavy police presence that could spark even further civil unrest, violence, and chaos in planning for the events of August 15th. Learning from other cities' experiences and at the request of a counter-protest organizers, KDPS kept its officers poised at the ready from a distance should the protests become riotous, assaultive, or physically destructive. Since the event, KDPS has been working with the subcommittee to complete a top-down review of the protests. This includes an extensive review of body cam footage, eyewitness accounts, social media videos, and other sources to see if we should change our approach for future events. As City Manager Ritzma has said, though, a thorough review of our response to the march and protest have shown areas of improvement that will help us better serve and protect the Kalamazoo community in the future. I believe the preliminary report developed by the subcommittee can serve as a roadmap to ensuring safety and an equitable approach to help us build stronger relationships and improve communications with our community. In addition, KDPS recommends implementing a credentialing system for media and legal observers to ensure they're clearly identifiable to police. We are also reaching out to national experts to provide training for members of the media and our officers on the best practice of supporting the important work of press and observers while ensuring everyone's safety. We're committed to transparency and accountability, and we welcome your input as we develop our plan of action for future events. I'll now turn it over to Assistant Chief Vernon Coakley, who was on the front lines during the march and the counter-protest.
Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Assistant Chief Vernon Coakley, and I have spent nearly 3 decades in law enforcement, and I started out in the city of Detroit. I am proud to have served in the Kalamazoo community for over 20 years. I was on the ground when the Proud Boys were in town on August 15th. I want to make it clear that KDPS closely monitored the Proud Boys in the weeks and days leading up to the march. Working with local activists and local counter-protesters, we developed a detailed plan for the Proud Boys March and counter-protests. We also closely coordinated with the Michigan State Police, the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department, the Kalamazoo Township and Portage Police Departments to ensure enough officers were on hand to respond to the incidents. Before and during the march, KDPS was actively monitoring multiple downtown locations. Officers were immediately deployed when the situation changed from peaceful protest to a chaotic and dangerous environment. Officers arrived on the scene in approximately 3 minutes, according to the comprehensive review of time logs, audio logs, and video footage. Our top priority remains keeping residents, visitors, and businesses in the City of Kalamazoo safe. By critically reviewing our response to the march and protest, working with the subcommittee to implement changes, and listening to our community, KDPS can better protect and serve the Kalamazoo community in the future. As a member of the subcommittee and an officer who works regularly with activists and protesters, I look forward to working to improve our processes, our protocols to ensure we keep residents and visitors safe. I want to repeat that. We want to make sure we keep our residents and visitors safe. Strengthen relationships in our Kalamazoo community, improve communication, emphasize the importance of equality, and reinforce accountability and transparency. I know this has been challenging times for Kalamazoo and frankly, the entire nation. But this is a great community and this is a strong community. And I truly believe that we will emerge stronger and more united than ever if we work together. And I believe the subcommittee's report in today's news conference is a first step in that direction. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much to all of our speakers this afternoon here. And with that, I would like to turn it over to the media to ask some questions. If you could also be sure to provide your name when you ask the question. Please provide your name, the outlet that you're with, and then your question, please. And then you can either do that by raising your hand virtually, and we will unmute you and tell you when to go, and we'll call on you. So we will be happy to do that now. Hi, Fox 17, yes, please.
Yes, it's actually Lauren Edwards, not Jason Walsh. I know that name is there. I've heard a number of times the credential system being mentioned for media members and legal onlookers, but I'm wondering just how effective do you think that will be? Because I think of the MLive reporter who was stating, you know, in his own video, I'm a reporter, journalist, but yet he was still apprehended that day. And so, yeah, just talk about, I guess, the effectiveness of what you're hoping that will do, having a credential system.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Lauren. That's a very good question. And I'd like to first have that go over to public safety. And if there's anybody else to weigh in on that, please feel free to go ahead. Chief?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Lauren, for your question. I think we have to start somewhere, and a credentialing system is a good first step, as well as training. And we all heard those that saw the video of him saying that he was an MLive reporter. Unfortunately, the officers didn't hear that. So having that credentialing system, that way to easily recognize reporters, we don't want a repeat of what happened. We apologize to MLive for the rest of that reporter. Officers had been announcing repeatedly that people needed to clear the area, and the MLive reporter and the public defender did not follow those directions. So that's why we recommend implementing a credentialing system for media and legal observers to ensure they're clearly identifiable to the police. And we are reaching out to national experts to provide that training so that both the media and officers on the best practices that can support this important work, because we do want to get better at that. And we have to start somewhere.
And Jeff, I would just add to that the idea of being proactive. And when we have events like that, beforehand, getting with the media and issuing those credentials helps everyone to identify each other and proactively. So when there is chaos and fluid situations, there's better chance of being able to identify reporters and observers so we don't arrest them. And again, I think that's going to be important, the proactivity about it.
Jim, I wanted to jump in here and just say a little piece about this as well. I can tell you, my heart was hurt when I heard that occurred. This is not what the city of Kalamazoo wants its relationship to be with the Fourth Estate. I am totally committed to the idea that we need a strong, free press in order to ensure that we have the government we want to have. So I believe this focus on creating a credentialing process, talking about this openly, is going to help address that. So I really thank you for your question. I think it's a profoundly important question.
Good, thank you. Ryan, please feel free to go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Sure. Just to follow up on Lauren's question, are you guys talking about implementing some form of credential process where these actual city credentials then that would be given to media outlets? And I ask that question from a couple perspectives. One, say Sam's given a credential, Joel's given a credential. Sam unfortunately gets arrested. Somebody else has to step in. Is there a credential for that person? I mean, the issue I think that we have, and I know there's been apologies and everything, is Sam was wearing a credential. Sam had an MLive backpack on. The legal observer was identifiable, wearing a fluorescent green hat like all of the other legal observers. So once this was discovered by police, once they were in vehicles, why were they continued to be processed at that point in time?
So Ryan, if I could, I hear two questions in there. One is the credentialing for multiple people from an organization, would that come from the city of Kalamazoo? And then the second question of why was he still processed after he was arrested? So maybe city manager could talk a little bit about how the credentialing might work, because and then chiefs, if you could talk a little bit about what the process happened that afternoon as far as the arrest procedures.
Thanks, Jeff. And Ryan, thanks for that question as a follow-up. I think, one, having more visibility around being credentialed, whether it's a media person or an observer, is important. Again, these events are fluid and there's chaos. And so when these split-second decisions need to be made, we can make sure that the press is protected and observers, and so they can perform their important role. And again, the training too is important, and we're going to be reaching out to national experts and best practices. You know, we're not the only community out there that has to deal with this. So what we can learn from other communities and other organizations, I think, is going to be very important.
Chief.
Hi, Ryan. Vernon Coakley here. Yes, and again, we certainly do not want to continue or have this happen again. As it's been stated earlier, the relationship that we have with each of you in your profession and your capacity, we want to work and are going to work hand in hand with you. This specific incident, the MLive reporter, his credentialing was very small. And as we spoke on a couple of things, that this is a fluid situation, announcements were being given. We're working, and once an arrest has been made, that arrest has been made, and he or she is then passed off to an arrest team. The information is given why they're arrested. And then once that occurs, there's a process where they go to a holding area, and then they are transported. And as Ryan, and I know you know, and many of you know, I was a boot on the ground on this day, and I was asked by many of you, was there a reporter arrested? I didn't have that information to give you at the time. I said I will get back to each and every one of you who asked, but without having that information at the time, and I may not have that information, but when he was identified, he was told why he was being arrested. And again, this is a learning session that we're all learning between law enforcement and the media, and the credentialing that others had. In particular, I want to point out the Free Press reporter from Detroit. He had a great credentialing system on him that identified him very, very broadly that he was a media person. So again, learning lesson. We look to put training into this and this credentialing system that we come about from this subcommittee meetings.
All right, thank you, Assistant Chief. Appreciate that. Sevilla Mann from WMUK, I believe you're next.
Hi, yeah, if I can get in two questions here. One is, I'm wondering how tightly you're going to draw the eligibility for this credentialing. Some of us are with establishment media, but there are a lot of freelancers in the news these days. There are people who write for second wave media. How restrictive are you going to make that? Secondly, I'm wondering, it seems to me like there's still a little ambiguity about why the MLive reporter was arrested. Was it because they couldn't tell that he was press, or was it because he was there when they said to clear out? I guess what I'm wondering is, suppose one day there's a protest where a reporter has one of these city credentials. If they're sticking around to cover what happens after people have been told to clear out, are they still risking arrest?
So thank you, Sevilla. Appreciate those two questions there. Manager Ritzman, maybe you could answer the question about kind of the type of research that will be going into how we plan to do credentialing and how that will unfold here still in the future. And then again, the chiefs real quick of anything else that will be added on the actual arrest.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you, Sevilla, for the question. We are looking at other communities, what they have done, and best practices out there. And we're gonna, I know this is a difficult, blurry area given, where we have, like you said, freelancers and then media reporters. And so we need to figure out a way to be able to credential both of them and allow a partnership to continue with the media as we work through this and allow our events to be televised, broadcast, and reported by the media. But it's got to be a partnership.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think I would just, thank you for the question, just like to piggyback on what City Manager Ritzma is saying. Officers had been announcing repeatedly that people needed to clear the area when the MLive reporter did not follow that direction when he was asked. And I think that in order to avoid that happening in the future, that the system of credentialing wherever those lines are drawn, but the education tool is going to be most important, so that both the media know how they need to behave and what the police expect from them, but additionally that officers know exactly what they're looking for when trying to identify media, because it seemed all over the board that day as to how media were identifying themselves. So education is going to be the biggest tool, and we're very excited about the credentialing system because it'll get rid of some of that fogginess that we have on that issue when it's such a chaotic time. So thank you.
So I think the next question is to Ben Lando.
Thank you. I think the video or picture won't come up, but you can hear me, I hope.
Yes.
My question is about the question separate from the lessons learned about media and legal observers. Assistant Chief Coakley, you mentioned about all the planning that went into understanding and preparing for this group ahead of time, monitoring them maybe ahead of time, and then during the event. I'm wondering what lessons learned are there so far on how you would adjust your planning for this group, monitoring for this group, and dealing with them in real time. A group like this, understanding you need to balance the First Amendment rights and the threats that the group poses to the public.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Chief Coakley, or yeah,
Absolutely.
Chief Coakley.
Thank you for the question, Ben. Lessons learned. Wow. We continually seek out to speak with the demonstrator or demonstrators, the organizer, and which has been my job from this onset of the demonstrations of 2020, as well as the counter protesters. And many times we don't get that communication. They tend to not communicate with law enforcement what their intentions are. So we can only use our best information from the intel that we gather from those groups. And it is a carefully balancing act with the First Amendment. As law enforcement, we have to allow people the freedom of speech. And that, it has a limitation to it. But continually to strengthen those relationships, I think, is the greatest lesson learned for me with this position, is to strengthen that relationship, have more face-to-face, and including in writing, having those communications in writing as well.
Very good, thank you. So we have a question that came in on the chat from Rainey from Channel 3. Would you like me to read that, Callie, or would you like to state your question? I don't hear her, so I will go ahead with it. First question was, again, on the training. What are we hoping to get from the media and officer training? And are we also hoping to get a better line of communication with the police to work towards more transparency? And either of the chiefs.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Callie, for that question. So I think what we hope to get from the training is clear expectations and clear lines of communication on both sides during a very chaotic situation. The job of the officers is to protect everyone there, including the media. And the media has a very special part to play in what's occurring and reporting that. And I think through that natural training of the media and the officers together will bring open lines of communication. I think we've learned through the entire summer of 2020 that at every turn, communication was our greatest struggle. And we're trying to improve that. This is an example of that today. This is a starting point. And we want to move forward and get better. And that comes through open lines of communication and training and clear expectations from both sides. Thank you. Oh, Assistant Chief Coakley would like to add to that.
If I may. Also, with the credentialing system, prior to the event starting, we have a briefing with our officers that are going to be on the street, making sure that the city of Kalamazoo is safe. Getting that information to the officers about what the credentialing looks like will be in the operations plan for each of the officers to be aware of. So next time, if we have an observer or a medical person, or excuse me, a media person that is in the downtown or recording that event, we as law enforcement will know immediately who that person is.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Callie also had a follow-up question regarding the reports that were released recently here, police reports that were recently made public. And her comments are that the reports seem to appear that the counter-protesters instigated the violence. Could the city clarify who the protesters are? Number one, if we are able to. And then secondly, there was no mention in the reports of an incident that appeared to show pepper spray from the Proud Boys onto a group of the counter-protesters on the sidewalk. So is that part of the confrontation under investigation? And is this incident still being reviewed? Chiefs, maybe I think probably the best for that, please.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Callie. The investigation is continuing to go on, and we're looking at all of the evidence, a lot of video evidence on that. The video reconstruction of the events, along with eyewitness accounts, revealed that the counter-protesters who had pledged to remain nonviolent repeatedly initiated contact with the Proud Boys as they marched through the street. We know that the Proud Boys did use pepper spray as these encounters occurred, and we're looking at all of that evidence as we move forward. Do you want anything?
And just to reiterate as well, I know you've heard me say this, but I have to say it again. I was on the ground, and the Proud Boys, this protest stayed in the street on Water Street, and it was infiltrated, if you will, or people came into it from the counter protesters and began to initiate the contact with the Proud Boys. This is still a fluid investigation. We're going to continue to review the tapes and the eyewitness accounts that we have about the event, and we're going to continue to move forward with possible charges.
Thank you, Chiefs. We are going to just have a couple more questions. If there's any other questions.
Hey, Jeff, could I just add on to what the chiefs were saying? In regards to video footage, there are literally hours and hours and hours of video footage out there. And I know there's been requests for that footage, and we are in the process of honoring those requests. Unfortunately, the capacity within KDPS and our attorney's office to review those videos before they go out is limited, especially under COVID. So our intent is to release the Proud Boy event video either later this week or early next week after Labor Day. And then shortly thereafter, we will be releasing video footage of the June events. And so I just want to let people know that that will be out there. They will be on our transparency page, which is off our city website. And people can go there and look at the footage once it's been posted, again, later this week and early next week.
Thank you, Manager Ritzma. Are there any other questions? We have time for just one or two more.
Kyle Mitchell with Wood TV. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, Kyle, we can. Please go ahead, Kyle.
My question is, in particular, with these terms of protester, counter protester, in this report, are you guys accounting for various groups that make up protesters and counter protesters? I know at least on the counter protester side, there were very different factions within that group. And do you worry that using those terms kind of oversimplifies kind of the diversity and I guess the complexity of what was going on there?
Okay, great. Great question, Kyle. Thank you. City Manager Ritzma, as he was talking about the protest and the terms that were used in the report, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Thanks, Kyle, for the question. So our goal in the report is to learn from this incident and create a better Kalamazoo for residents, families, and visitors, which is why we're planning to reach out to stakeholders and our partners out there and learn from this. The actual footage and the goal, or I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. We do need to learn from this and also create a future where those events will not occur, and we will definitely work towards that.
I guess my question is more of, probably directed more to KDPS of just, the amount of groups that were there. I mean, it seems like there were quite a few, was that revealed through this report, just the complexity of the groups and the dynamics that were going on there?
So Brad, Chiefs, I guess the question is along the lines of like, so many different groups are out there. How does that play into the work you do? If I phrase that right, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle. It's anything but simple. It is very complex. And we do simplify it by saying protesters and counter protesters. And each of those two groups are divided into different groups of ideologies and then purposes for being at a demonstration or a protest or a march. And that makes it even more difficult for law enforcement to create an operational plan that has every contingency in that. Many times people will come just to be bystanders. Some will come to be instigators. And many, many others are just there to be peaceful protesters. And we've seen this all summer. And we don't know someone's personal intentions at these events. And we try to be responsive when these actions happen. So you are right. It's anything but simple. It's very complex. And we can never break out every single ideology within either a protest group or a counter protest group. We would never get them all, but we try to use our best judgment and the intelligence and what we're watching across the country to help guide us in those decisions. And it's an ongoing process.
Thank you, Chief. We have time for one last question. See another one? Go ahead, Ryan from MLive.
Sure, you said that you were looking at more charges at this time after reviewing video. Are any of those charges against Proud Boys that you are looking at right now?
So for the chiefs, if you could answer that one, please.
So Ryan, I don't have the answer to that. Thank you very much. I will get a list of when the detectives have completed that. They are looking at behaviors and actions that occurred that day. And I haven't asked them to look at which group they were from. I've asked them to look at what happened and which charges we should send over to the prosecutor's office.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. So that concludes this event this afternoon. I want to thank everybody who participated. It was mentioned that the report that the city manager released on Friday is available on the city's webpage. It's kalamazooCity.org. We also have a full page that has a lot of other information. It's at kalamazooCity.org/KDPS transparency, all one word. So again, I want to thank everybody who participated in today's event, and that concludes this afternoon's event. Thank you.